afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our third annual Wild Wisconsin Winter Web Conference. I'm Jamie Mochik with the Nicolet Federated Library System, and on behalf of myself and the other systems who helped sponsor this, we're glad you're here. I want to thank again the 14 other library systems that helped sponsor this. They were listed on your screen, they're listed on our website, and this event really could not happen without their support and also their help. I have people out there tweeting. We have Jean Anderson from South Central as my backup in case, again, I pass out or someone hits a phone pole outside you just never know what's going to happen sometimes. And I know it's a long 2 days, but hang in there, people. Get some chocolate, take a walk, drink some caffeine, hang in there with me because we have two great sessions left. Our next presenter is Crystal Schimpf, and Crystal also spoke at the ARSL conference in September about tech instruction, and I really liked her practical ideas that she shared and her energy that she brought to that presentation. And today she is going to take 6 elements of tech instruction and break them down a little bit for us. So Crystal, whenever you are ready.
Great. Well, thank you, Jamie, and thanks to all of you for joining me today. I know that if you've been attending several sessions that this is getting towards the end, so I'm glad you've stuck around. And if you're just joining for the first session right now, then I'm glad to have you all the same. Jamie, I just wanted to thank you for having me at this conference, and it's a great opportunity to take a virtual trip to Wisconsin, so this is really exciting for me. I'm very passionate about this topic, and so I'm excited to be able to share it with all of you today. And so over the next 50 minutes or so, I'm going to share 6 essential skills that will help you provide excellent one-on-one tech instruction for library patrons. Now, these skills will focus largely on teaching technology to patrons in a public library environment, and that's where my experience has mostly been. But these skills can be easily adapted or transferred to other library types or environments and to other topics of instruction. Now, whether you're new to tech training or you're an experienced veteran, I hope that you walk away with a few new ideas to improve your skills. Now, I invite you to please ask your questions throughout the webinar and to join the discussion on Twitter as well. I'll be checking in on Twitter later on to follow up with you. All right, so first I want to tell you a little bit about myself. Now, I'm a degreed librarian, but I no longer work within the walls of one library. I've worked as a librarian and technology trainer in public libraries and nonprofits, and I've also worked as a technology training consultant at the Colorado State Library. I've spent a lot of time researching and working in the field of digital literacy in both libraries and nonprofit settings. Now I'm an independent training consultant, and I run my own business, Kixel. I work with libraries and nonprofits to help improve their programs and services related to training, and public access technology is one of the areas I work in most frequently. I work out of Berkeley, California, and I like to say that here we have 2 seasons, sunny and foggy. I probably shouldn't tell you this, but it's about 60 degrees here today, and the sun just came out through the fog. So, sending some warm thoughts your way. Now, I'd like to get to know a little bit about you too. So, tell me if technology training or technology assistance is a regular part of your job. You can enter a brief answer in the question box, and Jamie will fill me in on your responses in just a minute. If you're on Twitter, you can even tell me and everybody else on Twitter more about how technology instruction fits into your work. And, even if you provide only a small amount of assistance to people with technology, that makes you a technology trainer. And you may not have thought of it that way before, but it's really true. So hopefully you're sending in some responses. Jamie, what's it looking like?
I'm seeing a lot of yeses, yes, yes, yes. No, but I'd like to. Usually once a week, yes, a lot. Almost every day. I occasionally do one-on-one training. Yes, I'm a full-time computer trainer for the public. Yes, daily. Yes, we provide one-on-one. Yes, a lot, every day. Yes, yes.
Yeah, well, okay. Yeah, it
seeing a lot of that.
Yeah, there's definitely, and that's not a big surprise to me. I know if you work in service in a public library or really any library that people are asking questions about technology. And so hopefully today, all of you, even if this is, like I say, something new for you, you get a little bit to walk away with and some new ideas and tips to bring to your own skill set. Now this is our agenda for our session, and so we've already done our introductions. We're through that part. Next, we'll reflect a little bit on our own experiences so far. Then we'll talk about the challenges of one-on-one technology instruction. And we'll look at then the 6 skills, one by one. And for each skill, I'll give you a practical example and some tips for how to increase your abilities in that area. And we'll even go through a scenario of how to employ these 6 skills as you're helping patrons. I'll try to answer questions as we go along. I have a few question breaks planned in. So please type your questions in the chat as they arise, or even send them in on Twitter. The other thing I wanted to say is that I like to think of this as a conversation. The only thing that's a little bit different is that I don't get to hear your response, which is maybe a bit strange. But as I ask questions, I'd like you to consider what your response would be if we were sitting in the room together, and maybe take notes of any meaningful ideas that come to mind in the process. All right, so we're ready to reflect a little bit on our own experiences, and I'd like you to reflect on your own experiences as a learner. Let's put ourselves in the learner's shoes. Think of a time when you had to learn a new technology and you had the assistance of an instructor or a tutor or a helper. Try to think of an experience maybe that's in a one-on-one setting, perhaps being taught by a coworker, a family member, or a friend. Now remember everything you can about that experience, including what you were learning and the methods that were employed by the person giving you the instruction. And just think about that for a few seconds. And I want you to continue thinking about that situation, that scenario, and think about what worked well. What happened during that instruction that helped you learn? Also, what did not work? What happened in the interaction that made it more difficult for you to learn? Did you learn what you needed to? And were you able to apply that knowledge later on? Reflect on your experience with those questions in mind, and if you're on Twitter, you're welcome to share some of your ideas there, but you can also just keep them to yourself. So think about that. I'm going to give you an example from my own experience. Now, I like to think that I'm pretty tech savvy when it comes to internet and email and mobile apps, that sort of thing. But I'm not so knowledgeable when it comes to website design, coding, programming, but sometimes I need to know about those topics for my job. Now, I can recall a time when I needed to understand the difference between different programming languages. And as it was being explained to me, I was overwhelmed by all the technical jargon, and there was too much extraneous information being shared. I was in much too deep and got very frustrated. Once I realized, though, that that was happening, I clarified my question. The person who was explaining it to me was able to refocus the explanation in a way that I could understand. Now, I promise you I still don't know very much about programming, but I was able to get the information I needed to make a decision. So maybe you've thought of an example as well. And as you were thinking through some of those maybe challenges you faced as a learner, you may have also identified some of the key challenges for technology trainers. You might find yourself empathizing with that trainer in your reflection. And I think we all know that it can be very difficult to teach technology, especially those of you who've had some experience in that. So let's turn this exercise back towards ourselves. And I want you to visualize yourself as a technology trainer in your library or in some other setting. Many of you are already filling this role. And what are some of the challenges that you face as a trainer? Now, some of the most common challenges can be grouped into these categories that I'm about to share with you. Interpersonal communication, or the way that we communicate with learners, is certainly a big challenge. The techniques that we use to provide instruction is a type of skill that we maybe want to learn more about, the specific techniques. We want to think about keeping learners positive and engaged and seeing that they have a good attitude, and that can be tricky. And lastly, the way that we react to different situations that arise can really put us on the spot and make us feel uncomfortable. So these are some challenges, and maybe you can think of some specific examples or scenarios where these challenges have plagued you or challenged you. One other thing you may notice is that these challenges don't relate directly to the technology. So it really isn't the technology that makes tech instruction challenging. Of course, we want to have a basic understanding of technology, but teaching skills are what's really important here. Some of these skills are not that easily definable, and they're what we like to call soft skills. Focusing on developing these soft skills and teaching skills help us support our goal to provide effective instruction and quality service to library users. So that's why we're talking about this. Now, I hope to define some of those softer skills today so that you can walk away with practical knowledge that you can apply in your library. I won't be teaching you any specific technology skills, but there are many resources out there if that's what you're hoping to gain, and I've included some of my favorite resources for learning technology in the last slide of this presentation, which is also available afterwards, and I think Jamie's got a link for that in the archive of this conference. Now, today we're focused on live, in-person, and one-on-one instruction. We aren't focused on group, virtual, or recorded instruction. However, many of these skills will transfer over into those environments as well. Now, in a one-on-one setting, you as the trainer help somebody individually, one person at a time. This might be on the library floor, on public access computers, during an open lab drop-in, assisting somebody with a mobile device, or in a private book-a-librarian type appointment. Instruction may be taking place one-on-one even when just a casual question is asked. If you're helping somebody with technology in any way, there's an opportunity for instruction. You often won't know the topic until that interaction happens, so there's little time for you to plan or prepare. That's what makes it really unique. So we'll be looking at these 6 skills. And as I mentioned earlier, the biggest challenges to providing good technology instruction actually require us to develop our soft skills so we can handle any situation. Now, I've formatted these skills to look a little more like tips, so they'll be easier for you to remember. Each of them ties to basic competencies for technology trainers. I've included links to some examples of these competencies at the end of these slides, and so you might want to review them when the webinar is over if you'd like more information about those competencies. I'll go into each of these skills in detail and give you some real-life examples and practical tips to execute each one. Now, depending on how much experience you have, some of this may be familiar. If you're just starting out, it may seem like a lot of information, but my hope is that regardless of what level you're at currently, that you walk away with a few new ideas to improve your own skills at providing tech instruction, and that maybe you share those ideas with some people on your team so that as a whole we can improve our services in our libraries. And again, I'll invite you to share any ideas you have on Twitter as we go along. Now, the first skill that you need to have when providing technology instruction is the ability to be welcoming. Now, you might be thinking, that doesn't really even seem like a skill. Maybe it seems a little more like something out of an etiquette book. But I want to tell you that the ability to create a welcoming environment is a skill, and it's one that's taught in hospitality schools across the world. Now, being welcoming really is about providing good customer service to library patrons. And good customer service should allow the patron to feel like they're right to be coming to us for assistance. We wouldn't want to make someone feel uncomfortable for asking about a book, say on sexuality or bankruptcy. So why would we want to make them feel bad if they ask us a question about email? The challenge is that sometimes we actually inadvertently react to technology questions with our own fear, apprehension, and distaste, and it shows on our face. By practicing our customer service skills, we can provide a warm welcome to those learning technology and build our repertoire of activities that we do. Now, I'm sure you might be able to think of some ways to be welcoming when it comes to tech instruction. I'm going to share just a few of my favorites. Now, one of the easiest ways to be welcoming is just to remember to smile. A smile sends the message that you're a friendly person and that you're here to help. If smiling doesn't come naturally for you, that's the case sometimes, it's a skill worth practicing because it can set the tone for a more positive experience for the learner. Second, it's important to meet the learner where they are, physically, emotionally, and cognitively. Walk over to their computer, crouch down or sit next to them so you aren't hovering. Try to put yourself in their shoes. What might they be going through? And what are they ready and able to learn right now? Lastly, take some time to get to know the learner. What's their life story? If you open up yourself to their story, they'll be more able to open up to you, and you'll develop a good rapport with them. Their experiences may also help inform your instruction techniques. We tend to shy away from small talk with library patrons, but there actually can be a real benefit to it. Now, the second skill in our list is to assess the need of the learner. Now, there are two types of need that we need to assess. First, we want to assess what their technology needs are, what it is they're trying to learn. Second, we need to assess their learning needs, including how they will learn most effectively. Just like with research requests at the reference desk, it can be easy to jump to conclusions about what someone needs or wants to do with technology. You can easily adapt a reference interview to focus on technology needs to help you assess the need of the learner. By accurately assessing their needs, we can be sure to address them in a more focused and efficient manner. Now, there are several things that can be done to assess patron needs for technology instruction. First, ask lots of questions, especially open-ended ones. What are some examples of questions you might ask technology learners? My favorite is to ask a goal-oriented question. What would you like to be able to do through my help? Whatever that situation may be, how can I help? Now, the next three items on this list go together. Whether you're helping someone with a single question asked on the library floor or spending a 30-minute appointment with them, it's well worth the time to clarify their question and to help them identify their goals. It can be very easy to jump to conclusions or to impose our ideas of what they might need. But tech instruction really should be about what the patron needs and wants. Lastly, it helps to learn what they're interested in, because then you can use those examples to help them learn more. So, do they like sports? Show them how to get live updates for their favorite team. Along with their interests, be on the lookout for different learning preferences. Some people may be fine with hands-on practice alone, but others may need to write down each step along the way in order to remember it. It takes time and practice to develop these needs assessment skills, so let each interaction you have become a personal practice to develop these skills. Now, this next skill really is an exercise in self-restraint to some extent. While it might seem easy conceptually, it takes practice to execute it well. When we're teaching others, it's so important to give up the controls to the computer and let the learner drive. Now, most people learn to use technology by doing, not by watching. So as much as the learner might resist, you must insist that they be in control of the computer or device. If you have experience providing tech instruction, you may be able to relate to the story that I'm going to tell you right now. Now, I've noticed that some patrons, especially older adults, don't think that they can learn technology, and they're maybe even a bit embarrassed about that. I once had an older woman come to me and ask for help to fill out an online form. And when I approached her computer to help, she offered me her chair and said, "Here, why don't you do it?" Now, I recognized and I knew that this was an opportunity, though, to teach her something new and to empower her. But I knew she was reluctant to try it on her own. So I said, No. Why don't you sit here in your chair? I'll let you drive, but I'll walk you through it. Let me pull up a chair. And I proceeded to sit with her for a few minutes and to get her through the process. And, I could tell that she was nervous doing it, but she did a great job and she learned a few new things in the process. Now, I want to clarify that we're framing this skill in terms of an effective training technique. And there are many views and opinions out there as to whether or not library staff should complete a task for a patron on the computer or with the patron's personal e-reader or mobile device. Some libraries may choose to complete certain tasks for the patron as an extension of reference services, or knowing that in this case it might be faster. But each library is free to determine the policies related to this topic, however that library chooses. Right now, we're really talking about this in terms of best practices for training, though, and the goal is patron learning. So just keep that in mind. Now, there are a few specific ways that we can give control over to the patron when it comes to technology instruction. I used to always say, don't touch the mouse, and I had a little picture of a computer with a mouse literally running across it, but I think this extends beyond just the actual control of the computer. It's about giving the patron space to practice and kind of empowering them to lead the conversation. So let's look at some of these how-tos. First of all, let them drive and be in control of the computer or the device at all times. Second, by putting them in control, they are getting hands-on practice, and this will help them retain the process. Third, let them lead the interaction. Let their questions and needs drive the instruction. Ask them what they want to learn. And that can seem like a big risk sometimes in the moment to give that control over. What if they want to learn about something you don't know about? And what if they ask about something that you feel is inappropriate? Well, later we'll talk about being flexible and improvising, which can help you be responsive and to react more appropriately in those situations if they arise. But the benefit here is that you let the learners be more engaged and that they're more motivated to learn because they're interested in the topic and they're a little bit in control. So see if you can find a way to balance content and their interests. And this type of flexibility is really a great advantage of one-on-one tech instruction, so take advantage of it. The last thing on this list is to make a collaboration between the two of you. Work together to make the learning happen. So really treat it as a conversation together and not just a one-sided interaction. Like I said, this can be, one of the hardest things in this skill is to find the right way to tell reluctant learners that they're in control, and it takes practice. You might want to develop some stock phrases to have in your back pocket for when this situation arises, somebody wants you to do it for them. You'll need to find the words that work for you in different situations. But each interaction is really an opportunity for you to practice. So we've made it through the first three of these skills now, and I think it's a good time to break, and maybe if we have any questions, we can take one or two of them right now. Jamie, do we have any questions yet?
One came in from Renee, and she asks, what do you do if they can't type and have never used a mouse? And I have to say I ran into this situation a couple of years ago when I was at a library helping an older woman apply online for a job at Quick Trip. And she just wanted, she was retired but wanted some part-time work. And maybe I'm wrong. I did it for her because we didn't have a lot of time, and I knew she wouldn't be doing this a whole lot. So I don't know. Was I bad to do that for her, Crystal?
Jamie, I think that what you just described is a very common situation, and the person who asked the question probably has experienced this. I know I have as well, and it's a fine line. And I think in each situation, as library workers, we are always making the best decision to help the patron, right? And so sometimes we do make that decision to do it for them. Sometimes it's a job application. Sometimes it's, getting their email address form filled out. And sometimes it's just directing them to a website. But I think that when we're talking about a situation where we have the chance to teach them, then that's when we really want to give them the control. Now, when it comes to somebody who comes in and obviously needs to do a lot and doesn't yet have mouse skills,
right.
then I think in terms of teaching them, one of the things we have to do is set their expectations and let them know it's okay that they don't have that yet, but in order to get to step C, they also have to learn steps A and step B, and that's going to take a little bit of time. So again, this is framed around being able to train them. Not every situation where we help somebody necessarily is a fit for training and instruction, but there is that opportunity there, and we can take advantage of it. You know, can you teach them in that moment?
Right, and we would have been there till midnight had I let her type. And I prefaced it with, I'm going to type this for you. If you want to come in another time and work on your typing skills, I'm happy to do that with you. Let's set up some other times. So it worked out well in that situation. John asks, any thoughts about time frames for tech instruction? How much time with the person is too much for them or you as the trainer?
You know what? That's a really great question. I think it can be. I think there's a wide range there, and depending on the situation, you might go more or less than this. I think that what works well, especially if you're doing like a book a librarian appointment or even a drop-in one-on-one, there's a lot of information that gets conveyed in about 30 minutes, and that might be a good stopping point for something that's pretty structured and focused. You know, if somebody's maybe asking for help intermittently on the public access computers, they might be there for an hour or two, and you might not sit with them that entire time. You might help them intermittently. But I think in terms of focused instruction one-on-one, 30 minutes for most. Some people who have a bit more experience may want a bit more time than that. Or if it's like when you're walking them through a job application and kind of sitting with them, it might take them longer to get through it. You might be juggling some other help at the same time.
Great. Last question for now. What do you do when they come back and they don't know what to do, even though you just showed them how?
Yeah, take a deep, deep breath. We're going to talk about patience actually in one of the later tips, but I think, you know, it is very common. One of the things is that we immediately get frustrated and can pass that frustration on. It's kind of contagious, and so by taking a deep breath and then kind of accepting that it can be hard for us to remember different things, then we can help set the expectation of the person we're working with. It may be that they need to actually write down some of the steps, and so they have kind of a cheat sheet of what it is they're going to do the next time. And I will say that sometimes I recognize this sometimes falls into the difficult situation bucket, which isn't something we're getting as deep into today, in that sometimes we have people that no matter how many times they write it down, they won't bring it back, and you know, maybe we're suspicious that they're asking us for questions on a regular basis for social interaction, but that's, I think, a more rare circumstance, and I think most of the time it's about finding a strategy to help them remember. Maybe it is that they are taking in too much information each time, or maybe it's that they haven't practiced in between the last time we saw them, and you know, we might want to recommend to them that they log into their email every day so that they remember how to do it. You know, give them a little bit of an assignment and help them see the path towards being able to remember and learn more easily.
Great. Thank you. That's all for now, Crystal.
All right, great. Well, we'll go ahead. If you have more questions, we'll have another chance for them later on. But why don't we move on now to the fourth step. So this one is really one of my favorites, and it's one that's often overlooked. Sometimes I refer to it as being present or being in the moment, but it can be a big challenge to stay focused on the task at hand, no matter what the situation is. It means being mindful of all of the things around you. And with technology instruction, this means focusing on the learner and on their need. Staying focused helps us do a better job as an instructor or trainer because it allows us to respond more effectively. It also puts a better impression on the learner if we aren't constantly distracted by other things. And I know that it can be very challenging in a public library or any library to be distracted by the things around us or the other people who are vying for our attention or for our assistance. So I get that there's going to be a balance here. But let's think about staying focused and the practice that we bring to that, and what some of the specific things are that we can do to hone our skills and be more mindful of what's happening in the current moment. You might think of some of the other activities you do that relate to this practice of focus as well. Maybe you do yoga or ride a mountain bike or coach soccer or some other activity that really requires your focus and attention outside of the library world. Now, helping someone learn technology really requires us to stay focused on the needs of that person, and this can be tricky and made extra challenging. So let's take a look at some of the specific ways we can be more focused and present during technology instruction. First, we always want to listen closely to the learner and pay attention to the nonverbal cues also that they may be giving us. Now, there's a trap that we often fall into when we're listening. So we think we're listening, but actually we've begun to think of a response to the learner's question before they've finished asking it. And when we switch into that mode of formulating an answer, our brain has stopped listening. So I challenge you to see if you can wait until their question has been asked before you think of a response. You do have the time after they ask the question. You have more time than you think to come up with a response, and it's okay if your response is not immediate. So that's a good practice to develop. Now, by listening more closely, you'll be able to react more thoughtfully and to really take into account the needs that you've identified for the patron and think about their interests. You can craft your reaction in the best interest of the patron. And one other thing you might think about here is the space. If the learner needs to share personal information as part of their technology question, you might react by taking them to a private space where you can work with them one-on-one. Or if they're hard of hearing, you might react by finding a space that has less background noise than the reference desk area, or maybe your computers are by the teen area, so finding a quieter space. Now, third, I really like to think of instruction as kind of a form of improvisation, much like the improvisation that takes place in music. A jazz musician may know the melody and the form of a song, much like a technology instructor knows the basic material that needs to be taught. The jazz musician will improvise on that tune, but must also respond to the other members of the band, or else the result would be just noise and cacophony. Now, a technology instructor needs to improvise to the needs of the learner in order to react in harmony with their needs. And the flexibility and creativity is really essential in technology training. It can also come in handy in those difficult situations, just as we were talking about in the questions. Now, the last two things I have on this list is they go hand in hand. Don't be afraid to admit your own limits. Being present in the moment and being mindful means that you're willing to do that. But when you have a question or a situation that arises and you're not familiar with it, it's an opportunity to learn with the learner and to explore that topic. You don't have to know everything about technology to help that learner accomplish their goals. You can also help them set expectations for how much time it may take to learn new skills, so you can learn together. All right, now the fifth skill in our list is to take it slow. And this isn't just about going at a slower pace, but it's also about being deliberative about what you share. The turtle often gets kind of a bad rap for his slow pace, but if you've ever watched a turtle move, you will know that his movements are very deliberate. Putting one foot forward to take a step is a great way to get somewhere. And no matter what speed you go, you can still follow the same path and get to the same destination. The same applies for technology instruction. Many people learning technology need to learn it one step at a time. And if we can be deliberate in our instruction, then those steps will be easier for them to learn. So how can we slow it down? Here are a few tips. You can break instruction down into deliberate, discrete steps and take it one step at a time. We often forget when we're teaching technology how many steps are involved in something that we do every day. Next, you can focus on carefully selecting your teaching points. What's most important or essential and what's extraneous? Focus on the essential points first. One advantage to having fewer teaching points is that you have less material to cover, which means that you don't have to rush through the information, which is also a bonus for those new learners. Now, even in situations like one-on-one instruction where you aren't preparing in advance, you can still benefit from a slow pace. Just an example is if a patron asks for help learning how to upload an attachment to an email, it may be very tempting to explain all of the different variables they may encounter with a different file format or storage locations or email programs. But you can also just focus on the very specific task they're trying to learn. This will save you time, and it's better for the library patron to learn just a very basic way to do something. The third thing here is to try not to assume that a person already knows something. Ask the person what they already know to ensure that your instruction is effective and doesn't go over their head. Or the alternative is that you might speak in terms that are too basic. Now, you may want to practice how to clarify current knowledge. If we think about that email attachment example, you might ask, can you tell me what type of experience you have had working with attachments? Maybe they've done it before. And this can help you determine the appropriate pace. Now, the last thing here is to remember to be patient. And patience isn't something that comes easily, especially maybe for me. I don't know about you. But it's so important to teaching. Now, the library patron may not learn as quickly as you would like them to, but if you are impatient or rushing, it won't change anything. It won't help them learn it faster. We can't change that. One thing I like to do for myself is when I know I need to be patient, I take a deep, slow, and soft breath to kind of slow down my own pace. Just a tip here, though, is you want to make sure that that deep breath doesn't come out sounding impatient like a big, deep sigh. But that can be very helpful just to cue your body to be a little bit more patient. All right, so we're on our last skill, and it may be no surprise that communication is on this list. Of course, communication is important for teaching. It's especially important with technology instruction because we need our learners to be able to receive and understand the information before they can process it into learning. Clear communication is something that takes practice, and it's something we can continually reflect on and improve. Given the complexity of technology, communication can be doubly challenging. Just think of this example. If you're trying to explain cloud computing to a library user, now there's great potential for confusion on this subject. And I think that even if you're an experienced technology user, some concepts like this can be very difficult to explain. So it's important to distill the concept down to the most essential elements and to simplify that concept so the learner can understand it. Remember that learners don't need to understand every detail of how a computer works in order to operate it successfully, just like we don't need to know everything about how our car engines work in order to drive them. Just to give you an example regarding cloud computing, you could explain it like this. Now, when you use web-based computer software like email, you're using cloud computing. A good example of cloud-based email is Gmail, which is created by Google. And when you use Gmail, you don't have to download anything to your computer. All of your email messages are stored in the cloud, and they can be accessed through any internet connection. You can access your Gmail account from any computer or mobile device that's connected to the internet, and that's an example of cloud computing. Now, there are a lot of details I could have included in that description, but I didn't really have to in order to get the concept across. And for people who are learning a concept for the first time, it's better to keep it simple. So by including a relevant example, it gives learners something to relate to. So let's just briefly look at some guidelines for communicating clearly. As we discussed, try to simplify your ideas and concepts and give relevant examples that will mean something to the learner. Also, avoid the use of technical jargon unless it's truly necessary. When you do have to use jargon, be sure to define it clearly and simply. In the example that we just discussed, cloud computing is definitely a jargony computer term, but I was defining it in my explanation. I could have used a lot of other confusing terms in my definition, but I decided to keep it simple. Maybe you're thinking now of some other jargon terms related to technology that you might use with caution. You can jot a few of those down just so you'll remember to avoid using them later. Lastly on this list, be sure to check in with learners and to allow time for them to ask questions. This will give them an opportunity to clarify concepts that are still unclear and can be a good time to review what's been covered at the end of a session. Might also help them move into the next one with a bit more of a memory of what has been covered. So those are a few good tips for that. So we've made it through the 6 skills, and before I go into kind of a scenario, we have time for maybe 1 or 2 questions. Jamie, do we have any more questions at this point?
There is one that came in, so we'll cover that. Joe asked, how do you respond to people who insist that they're, quote, computer illiterate, but don't want to engage enough to learn?
And I suppose here there's a couple of different scenarios that might play out in this. And you know, one thought that I have is it always our place to force somebody to learn? Again, we're talking about the best training techniques, and we might offer that as an option. But if they don't want to learn, then is it always necessary for us to teach them? But there's also kind of a more persuasive and enthusiastic way to approach that, which is, again, going back to maybe being welcoming and putting on that very positive attitude about it and saying, you know, well, maybe we could just try, you know, trying to approach it with a bit of positivity and say, you know, have you ever tried to use a computer? Maybe we could just try something, probing them for things that they're interested in. I know sometimes we do get library patrons who are so dependent on us at the reference desk or the service desk because they don't have those technology skills. But I think by forcing them into that situation where they have to learn isn't necessarily going to help them. You know, if it is more of a difficult situation, which I imagine it might be, where the patron is needing to fill out a form or something online and they're really reluctant to do it themselves, you know, some libraries also do have policies that they won't encourage that type of reliance on the library staff to actually input the forms. But like I say, that's a whole nother webinar and a whole nother conversation. But there are some times where, you know, it's not necessarily that we are always going to be able to teach somebody, but when we do have that opportunity, these skills can be really helpful.
Great.
That helps.
Yeah, we'll do another question. And I wanted to remind everyone there's a lot of good conversation going on in the question chat area. Things that you guys are sharing, I'm dropping in there. So if you don't have that open that up. And great suggestions in there, too. Trixine asks, do you have any suggestions about how to deal with one-on-one when we are all part-time staff?
Yeah, and I'm guessing that part of this is that there's really not a lot of time outside of helping people who are approaching with a need to the desk to set time aside for those one-on-ones. I've seen this type of situation, so hopefully I'm getting it right. One thing is maybe to perhaps pilot, and this comes to library management, to pilot a type of service where during a certain time each week is set aside where even the part-time staff can be available to provide one-on-one instruction if needed. So there's a backup person at the service desk who can cover the walk-in questions and that sort of thing, but where you can devote time for those longer sessions. And often what I've heard is that, and what I've seen happen is that when you can direct the focus for one-on-one sessions into a single time block, it actually alleviates a lot of the other problems when you have somebody who needs something and you don't have time to help them right now. If you have a time you can refer them to, it actually just alleviates a lot of pressure. But the other thing is that we do a lot of juggling, right? And so sometimes we can't sit with one patron for 15 or 20 or 30 minutes, but we can continue to check back in with them. So in fact here, on this screen, I have check-in with learners at the end of the session, but you can also check back in with them as they're just using the computer, get them started on something new, and let them practice for a while, and then come back when you have another free minute. I know that it is not easy to deal with scheduling and kind of the limitations we have on staff, but those are just a couple of approaches.
Okay, thank you.
Great, great. All right, so I think we're ready to maybe move into what I have as our last section here. We've looked at all of the 6 essential skills, and I thought it might be helpful if we walk through kind of one scenario that it will employ all 6 of the skills in some way. So for this, we're going to do a little bit of pretending. Let's imagine Carl. He's a library patron who's come in with his new e-reader with this very confused look on his face, and he's asked about library resources. So let's see if we can help him with the 6 skills we just learned. Carl approaches you and he says, I just got a new e-reader as a gift, and I heard I can get e-books from the library, and it's completely free. Is that right? Well, the first thing you'll remember to do here is to be welcoming to Carl. Show him a grin and say, why, yes, you can get ebooks from the library, and it's free, as long as you're a local resident and you have a library card. Think about what else you might say to welcome him. You might want to find out if he already has a library card. You'll probably want to find that out. You may also want to take a minute to get to know him a bit. When was the last time that he came to the library? What types of ebooks does he like to read? And what might he want to learn about today? Also, you might want to look and observe what type of e-reader he actually has. Now, after this plays out, it turns out that Carl has a library card, but he doesn't come to the library all that often. He mostly likes reading the newspaper, but he wants to begin reading more history and biography this year. His e-reader is actually a tablet, so you realize he can probably access the internet from it as well. All right, so now it's time to assess his need. You'll want to ask Carl some open-ended questions, much like a reference interview. How can you help him? Would he like help learning how to download a book? What experience does he already have with computers and mobile devices? And does he have a few minutes today to learn the process? Remember not to jump to conclusions about any of these things. You learn that Carl would like your help, but he only has a few minutes right now. He's interested in ebooks, but he also would like to see if he can read the news. He uses a computer for work, and he's used a touchscreen before. Now you just want to clarify things with him. So you tell him that today, how about you help him get started with his new tablet e-reader, and that you have time to show him how to access the internet and read news. But you suggest he come back sometime soon to learn how to download an ebook, which takes a little bit more time. And he says, that sounds like a good plan. All right, so now it's time for some hands-on practice. And before you get involved in this e-reader tablet device, you guide Carl over to a table where you can sit and work with him. He immediately tries to hand his tablet to you. So what would you say to encourage him to keep control of the device? Now, you might remind him that he'll remember the things you teach him better if he gets to practice it and if he's in control. You collaborate with him, showing him how to turn on the device, connect to the library Wi-Fi network, and access the internet. But throughout that, you're letting him to speak up and be a part of the process. Carl's learning very quickly, though, and soon he starts to ask off-topic questions about games and some other apps that he's heard of. So now it's a good time to help Carl stay focused and for you to stay focused. He's very excited by learning these new things, but if you give him too much information right now, he may not be able to remember any of it. So how would you react to this situation and help him stay focused? You might let Carl know that there's so much he can do with his tablet, but in the beginning it's really good to kind of focus on one thing and pick one thing to learn. Ask him if he still wants to read news online, if that's still a goal, or would he rather download a free game app at this time. And your flexibility helps Carl feel like he's really in control of his own learning here. Carl decides to stick with online news, and you set out to help him accomplish that goal. You aren't familiar with the specific tablet that he has, so at one point you actually struggle to find the internet search function in order to find the newspaper he wants to read. So what you do is you let him know that you're learning with him and that there's so much technology out there, you couldn't possibly know all of it. And Carl laughs with you in agreement. All right, so as you go along, you are continually remembering to take it slow. Even though Carl's experienced, he needs that time to process and learn. You carefully explain each step of the process, and you take great care not to over-explain any of it. You keep it simple so that Carl will remember it all later on. At one point, Carl doesn't find the exact link you're directing him to, and he has trouble clicking on it. You start to feel a little bit frustrated, but you take a deep breath, and you remember to be patient, and think about what it was like for you when you first started using technology, and new technologies. Now, before you know it, Carl's moving on to the next step, and it really didn't take as much time as you thought it would. Throughout the session with Carl, you're mindful to avoid using tech jargon and abbreviations. And when you told him about the Wi-Fi, you checked in to make sure that he understood that term, which he did. At the end of the session, you ask if he has any last questions. Carl says that he thinks he understands everything, and he's really excited to learn more. You remind him to practice and that he should come back and learn more, and maybe next time he'll have time to learn how to download an audiobook so that he can get started on his reading goal for the year. All right, so Carl says thanks, and he's on his way. And later that evening, he gets on his tablet at home, and he reads a bit of the news, and he's very happy. We've successfully employed these 6 essential skills for one-on-one tech instruction, and we've helped Carl with his new device. Now, I know that this may not be like every tech instruction session that you'll ever give, but I hope it gives you some idea of how to incorporate these skills in real life. I also know that not every session is this easy, and that sometimes we have very difficult situations when it comes to tech training. But I just want to emphasize that if you're employing these skills, chances are it will be easier than if you didn't employ them, even in a difficult situation. So, wait, there's more. We have a bonus tip. And because we made it through all 6 of the skills, and I have one more tip that I just wanted to share with you for the day. So are you ready?
You're so sneaky, Crystal.
Surprise. Well, my bonus tip is that, okay, with all the serious talk we have of technology instruction, I just want to remind you to have fun as you do it. And you may not be throwing confetti and wearing party hats and having cute, adorable pugs as you're teaching technology. But there are plenty of things you could do to incorporate a little bit of fun, and it is really worth it. So here are a few things that I recommend. Using jokes and puns can be a really good way to bring a bit of laughter and to liven your instruction. And a lot of times we might have older adults that we're teaching some of this, and that type of sense of humor may actually come across really well with them. All right, so what do you get when you cross a computer and a lifeguard? A screensaver. Get it? All right. No, okay. Seriously, though, watch out for the jokes that may be naughty or offensive. You can search for technology jokes online, but they're not all PG rated. So just watch out for those and make sure you know your audience really well, but it can be a fun thing to do. Also, practice with fun websites. So say you're going to show somebody Google Maps. why not take a trip to Disneyland and zoom into the street view? Everyone loves a trip to the Magic Kingdom, right? And then lastly, just share your enthusiasm with technology. If others see that you like using technology, they'll be more motivated to try it, and they might even have fun doing it themselves. So, so that's my last word, I guess, on this. So here you see the 6 essential skills plus our bonus tip at the end. And we're about to wrap up. I think we actually should have a few minutes for some final questions. But before we do that, I just want to ask you to take a minute and think about which of these skills or which tips were most meaningful for you. And I want you to think, I want you to pick 2. And I want you to write them down. A piece of scrap paper, a notebook, a napkin, anything you've got around you. I always have like a million Post-it notes on my desk. And then I want you to think of a goal for improving on those 2 skills over the next 3 months. Think about what you're going to do to improve your skills and how you're going to practice them. And how will you bring them to your tech training experiences in the library? Or how are you going to begin to do a little bit more tech training in your library? So I want you to write down a few of those ideas right now so you remember them later when you come back to this topic.
Crystal, we have a question from Jim, and he asks, how do you deal with a person who asks the same thing even though they have taken notes the last 5 times you showed them something?
Yeah. Again, I think this can sometimes be related to a really difficult situation in that maybe the person has a learning disability or is reaching for some social interaction. Sometimes it's helpful to try a different type of explanation. And so, if you are able to think of it in a different way or break it down into a different series of steps, if they've got those instructions with them, is it that those don't have visuals so they can't locate where that button is on the page? If you have a question that you have to answer for somebody every week for 3 months, is there a way you can create a guide that then you could hand to anybody on that situation that has just a couple of quick screenshots in it that might be helpful for them? But I think, trying different approaches is more helpful than just repeating it in the same way.
Great. Do you have a slide with your contact info in case people want to follow up with you? Great.
In fact, here it is.
Great.
Here it is.
Great. Before the last question, I want to ask all of you listening, and because I'm seeing a lot of your same names at all these sessions, and I was thinking last night, would it be helpful to maybe a month or two down the road to do a follow-up to this conference? We could, just kind of discuss the sessions, and it would be interesting to see what you took from them, where you're at, if you took any of those skills and tried something new. You're spending a lot of time listening to all of this, and I don't want it to be for nothing. So type in your chat box if you think that would be interesting. Yes or no, what you think. And we'll take it from there. Great.
And I'll also invite everybody to stay in touch with me. So you've got my email address on the screen, crystal@kixel.com, and also on Twitter @crystalschimpf. And then you can also sign up for my email newsletter where we send out tips. It's like 2 to 3 times each month we send out some tips about training and things to do with technology and just kind of have a conversation there through our news list. So I invite you to stay in touch with me and follow up with any questions you have later on. I'm happy to answer them. I know sometimes the questions come later once you get back out away from your computer and on the library floor.
Great. So, Crystal, I'm asking all the presenters this, and that is, what do you find most exciting about working in libraries or working with libraries right now?
Right now. I think that libraries have a very interesting position right now. and it's been changing, although if you looked at the history, how much has it really been changing, I'm not sure. But I think that we are big community connectors and catalysts for change in our communities. And people, the library is one of those public places where people can go and people can connect with one another. And so when I see libraries that are doing things to help their communities grow and to help their communities increase their offerings or to build community programs, I think that's really meaningful. I think digital literacy and technology is a big part of that, and so if you're helping your community gain more technology skills, I think that's really, really awesome.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Crystal, for this excellent presentation. Thank you, all of you, again, for the questions, for the comments. Again, we can't see one another, so I think to have those comments come in and for me to be able to share them with everyone, it just makes a webinar so much more fulfilling and just so much better. We have one more session at 4 o'clock, and that is our Trigger Talks, where we are going to have 6 different speakers. I am not sure how this is going to turn out because we've never done it. So I hope a lot of you stay with me, keep your energy up, and stick around for that. I think it'll be interesting, to say the least. So hope to see you for that. If not, have a great rest of your day. So long, everyone.
Bye. Thanks.